Hello, everybody. Gonna give some folks some time to trickle in. A couple more seconds. Perfect. Okay, so as folks are trickling in, just want to say thank you so much for being here at today's event. This is a Chronus webinar, and we are going to be talking about activating micro sponsorship to tackle workplace inequities. So we're so excited that you are here. You could have chose anywhere in the world to be, but you are here today. So thank you guys so much. Go ahead and share the next slide. So before we dive in, just want to call out the agenda. Of course, welcome again. We are going to do introductions, and then Jody's going to get into her slide, her presentation. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to put it in the chat. But we will be doing Q&A at the end of the session. Okay, so I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Nyla Herbert, and I'm the content marketing manager here at Chronus. And my daily role here at Chronus is to create storytelling around the topics that matter most to us, which is mentoring and ERGs. And then also, of course, the success of our customers and their participants. And then I'm so excited to introduce Jody Peterson, the Vice President of Customer Experience here at Chronus. And just a little bit about Jody. As Vice President of Customer Experience, Jody leads a team of professionals whose daily mission is to partner with Chronus customers to achieve their mentorship-driven goals. Customers are at the heart of everything the team does. So Jody brings extensive corporate experience and a proven track record in creating and leading successful mentoring programs. She founded MentorStrat after developing and implementing strategies for a Fortune 50 mentoring program. Her achievements include securing place on Diversity Inc.'s list of top companies for mentoring and being named Mentoring Champion of the Year by a leading mentoring software partner in 2021. And just a fun fact, Chronus acquired MentorStrat, and we are just so happy to have MentorStrat's capabilities in our software. So before we move on to the next slide, please let us know where you are in the world, and let us know what organization you're coming from. We want to understand who you are and what you do in the workplace and how we can be of service to you. So we'll just take a minute for everyone to just drop it in the chat where you're from, what you do. And just to let you know where I'm from, I'm in Atlanta, Georgia right now. Of course, you guys already know I'm the content marketing manager, but I would love to know where you guys are coming from. So I'll give you guys just a couple of moments before we move on to the next slide. So drop that in the chat, and we would love to know where you guys are from and what you do as well. Okay, we see people from Chicago, Florida, HR managers, director of career management. Awesome. We'll keep them coming. We're going to go to the next slide, and I would love to share a little bit about Chronus. Now that we know a little bit more about you guys, I want you to know more about us and who we do and what's at the center of what we do. So Chronus is an employee-driven development platform offering mentoring and ERG management software to help enterprise organizations combat the disengagement and organizational connection crisis. So we've helped large enterprises, government agencies, nonprofits, and academic institutions do this for the last 15 plus years with a platform that makes customers feel secured, supported, and ready to scale. Now, if you want to learn more about Chronus and how we can help your organization thrive, please click the Get Demo button in the right corner of your screen at any time. Outside of this webinar, you can visit Chronus.com to learn more about our platform and how we're helping customers combat the connection crisis in the workplace. And before we move on, I just want to share a couple of housekeeping tips to keep in mind. If you have any questions for us during today's presentation, please feel free to put them into the Q&A section of the chat box, and that will be to the right of your main screen. If you would like to share your thoughts, comments, and connect with other participants today, please click that chat button for everyone to see. As far as the message box, that's for personal one-on-one communication. So if you want to follow up directly with someone, maybe Jody said something that was really insightful, please send her a direct message or put your Q&A message into the Q&A box. But if you have a direct message, you can click on the message screen. And now, if you're unsure where to put something, just drop it wherever is easiest, and we will make sure it's addressed at the right time and place. But other than that, I will hand it off to Jody. Take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Nyla. Yeah, if all else fails, just drop whatever you have in whatever box, and we'll go ahead and make sure that you get your answers to your questions. So I want to talk about, and thank you for the warm introduction. I've been at Chronus just a few months now, but working with the team since the beginning of the year prior to the acquisition of Mentorstrat. I spent a lot of time in organizations over the last 3.5 years, helping not only develop mentorship programs, but also talking about sponsorship and kind of evolving this idea of what sponsorship means. So that's what we're going to talk about today. The objective would be to think about ways how each and every one of us can make a personal and professional commitment to tackling workplace inequities through sponsorship. And I'm going to tell you all about what micro sponsorship is, some ideas about how it works, and we'll get into all the details. But prior to doing that, I just want to find out from all you guys. I saw everyone kind of coming in from different organizations in the chat, whether you have a sponsorship program at your organization currently. I think they're going to put a poll up on the screen, and just let us know kind of where you're at on your sponsorship journey. All right, awesome. All right, so some have sponsorship programs formally. That's great. About 36% would like to start one. We can definitely talk about that. Having only mentorship programs currently.
Awesome to see all of the responses that we are getting. For the ones that are saying, we don't have a sponsorship program at the organization currently, but would like to start one, please share your thoughts in the chat. Maybe you would like to start one and don't know where to begin. Of course, Jody is our subject matter expert, and she's going to dive into all of that. But if you have any particular questions, please feel free to put it in the Q&A portion, Q&A chat box.
Awesome. Thank you, Nyla. Okay, so let's dive in. I can see we're going to talk about what sponsorship is, what's the difference between sponsorship and micro sponsorship, what's the difference between mentorship. Let me go ahead and set some context. So in 2023, 37 of the top 50 companies CEOs were white men.
Now, Jody, it may be my mic, but I can't hear you. Can everybody else hear Jody? You can just say yes in the chat if you can. Okay, perfect.
Okay. Sorry, Nyla. All right. Well, I'll try to keep going. So if you can't hear me for some reason, then please go ahead and start putting that in the chat, because we want to make sure you get all the information. All right. So if this information on the screen makes you feel uncomfortable, it should. It makes me feel uncomfortable. I guess that it probably makes most of us uncomfortable, but probably for a few different reasons, right? We're not all the same. Some people it might make uncomfortable because that's 74%. So 37 of the top 50 is 74%, whereas the total percentage of white men in the US is around 31%. So it's not exactly representative when you think about it. Other people might be uncomfortable because that number is trending downwards. So in 2010, 92% of the top 50 CEOs in the company or in the country were white males. And now it's 74%. But regardless of your reason, discomfort usually signals change. And change is happening in an unprecedented way, especially over the last 4 years. Let me talk about that a little bit. With the murder of George Floyd in 2020, a social justice movement was ignited on a scale that we haven't felt since the 60s. But this time there was a big difference, and maybe it was the rise of social media giving people greater access to the world, but companies responded to the movement in a way that we've never seen before. But they did so with various different degrees of activity and of success. So some companies put inclusivity statements on their website. Some people swiftly fired people who were making racist comments online in the workplace. Most companies created DEI departments if they didn't already have them. And some people held conversations that allowed employees to tell their personal stories of bias and discrimination to help people get a better understanding. I had the privilege of attending a preview of a documentary called Arise Firebird. This documentary celebrates the resilience and empowerment of women and people of color professionals in the workplace. The documentary follows the journey of 3 women as they overcome inner obstacles and really try to find joy in their professional lives. After the screening, the director and producer, her name is Jimmy Okobanjo, she led a conversation where she talked about her experiences as a Black woman in her career. We started talking about a whole variety of topics, but we got on the topic of sexual harassment and sexual assault in the workplace. Now, Jimmy is from the UK, so she has a little bit of a different lens on things, but she did spend a significant period of her time working in South Africa. She said something that was so gut punching to me. It just sticks with me to this day. And even like how I felt hearing it sticks with me to this day. I'm never going to forget it, probably, when she talked about her return from South Africa to the UK. And this is what she said. I long for the days when all I had to worry about was being sexually harassed in the workplace. So when she returned to the UK, she experienced both the sexual harassment, which is very common across the world, but also then being back into the pool of where she was experiencing racial discrimination. Racial discrimination so bad that she longed for a time when all she had to worry about was being sexually harassed in the workplace. Since work is where we spend the majority of our time, organizations need to start to think about people beyond shareholder value, beyond the profits and all of that, and really start thinking about the safety of employees at work. And there really isn't any reason not to. In fact, there's a strong case for equity, safety, and belonging in the workplace. Companies committed to workplace inclusion significantly outperform those that are not committed. In a recent McKinsey Diversity Matters report, companies committed to diversity show a 39%, that they're 39% more likely to outperform those that aren't. The why is apparent, why we should focus on equity, safety, and belonging. The how gets a little bit trickier. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. I don't know if you can see this. Oh, we'll make it bigger. Okay. So despite the strong evidence for embracing diversity, the pushback from society and from lawmakers has been really fierce. The culture war,
You have
especially.
muted yourself.
I muted myself. I am not muted. Okay. If you can hear me, just fine. I'm just going to keep going. Hopefully you can hear. So the culture war, especially here in the US, is running really wild. Essentially, we have politicized identity. I had the opportunity to work with a lot of companies, as I said, in their mentorship programs. And I was working with an organization that implemented a group mentoring program that was teaching allyship skills to men so that they could advocate for change within their organization. At the end of the program, the participants attended a town hall where they had a panel discussion. I was super excited to hear from the group and learn about their experiences, but I was kind of bummed when the participants were introducing themselves, and one of the men who had gone through this 6-month program said this: I was hesitant to join something so political at work. I cringe when I heard him say this. I hope that he would then say that he had learned throughout the course of the program that people's identities aren't political. While he said he learned a lot, he never did kind of backtrack on that comment and correct himself. And look, I get it. Like, one program isn't going to change beliefs that might be deeply rooted in someone, and at the very least are front and center due to the constant bombardment on social media, the news. Every day we're hearing about these issues. What I did take away was that there aren't any quick fixes, and there are a lot of obstacles that we're going to encounter along the way. When the social justice movement gained momentum in 2020, many companies turned to formal mentorship to create inclusive communities, to foster that sense of belonging. And this was great. And it's an area that I have really big passion for, mentoring. Obviously, I created a whole company around it, and spend my career working in this space now. And as some of you saw in the poll earlier, some companies created formal sponsorship programs. Some of those programs are diversity based. Sponsorship is underutilized, but it's a very effective way to level the playing field for underrepresented groups. So just so we're on the same page, and I know someone asked this in the chat earlier, but I'm going to clarify the difference between sponsors and mentors, talk about what mentorship is or sponsorship is a little bit. Mentors learn about a mentee's skills, their challenges, goals. They give them advice. They help them solve problems. They help them become the best version of themselves. The role of the mentor usually ends at providing actionable advice, and the mentee is responsible for putting those pieces together and taking action on that advice. Sponsorship, on the other hand, is driven by the sponsor. Sponsors turn around to the organization. They take actions that help advance their protege's career. In a lot of ways, they're putting their own professional reputation on the line, and that takes time to develop a relationship where a person can feel comfortable advocating at this level. The programs that I have seen in organizations have had varying degrees of success, primarily for this reason. Some did really well. They created a mentorship program that over a year and a half to 2 years, a path to sponsorship was created. So as people developed those relationships, it became more natural for the mentors to turn around to the organization and advocate for the mentees. But some wanted quicker results. So they attempted to arbitrarily pair marginalized people with executives without them really knowing one another, without a structure in place to facilitate building that relationship. And it really created an awkward power dynamic, resulting in actual sponsorship actually happening. Other companies wanted to broaden the reach of sponsorship. So they asked all of their employees to take a pledge to sponsor someone. So a lot of employees took the pledge. But what they didn't do is they didn't provide adequate tools and training and support to teach people what sponsorship is. How do I do it effectively? Why would I do it? When these types of programs weren't as successful as they would like, even when many, many people took the pledge, there just wasn't a lot of sponsorship that was actually happening. When this happened to this company, they reversed course and they reversed how they were kind of defining sponsorship, and they went back to the model where sponsorship was essentially exclusively for senior level leaders. And obviously, we already talked about that, but knowing that those executives are already primarily white males, they kind of cut off this path to create a diverse leadership pipeline. I'm working with an organization right now where they have identified that their sponsorship program is starting at a point in their leadership pipeline where the majority of their underrepresented employees have already been squeezed out. So their sponsorship starts here up at the top at like the director plus level, where they already don't have representation of women and people of color in those positions. So we're working with that organization on a plan to correct that, to make sure that they're feeding people into their leadership pipeline that are representative of the rest of their organization, and that they can move into that path to sponsorship to achieve some of those executive positions. So it's important to understand for you guys what's happening in your organization, especially if you already have a formal sponsorship program, making sure that it's working how you want it to work and it's taking those right actions. as a lot of your companies are having sponsorship conversations, make sure that you're, considering all of those things. And if you want some help with that, that's definitely something that we can help you with here at Chronus. All right, so let's talk about why, without intention, sponsorship is being reserved for primarily white males. So the science behind human behavior indicates that our nature and our animal brain tendencies lead us to naturally want to sponsor someone who reminds us of ourselves. And it just perpetuates more of the same. So a white male executive chooses a successor to sponsor that they can bring up in their own image, and that leaves them feeling more comfortable and trusting that they can retire and leave the company in good hands with a younger version of themselves. I remember when I was younger, and I was building my first team, I often interviewed women and I hired them because they reminded me of me. I mean, I thought I was pretty awesome. So I wanted to bring people up in my own image. And I would literally say that out loud, not knowing how harmful it was. I cringe when I think about it today. And not knowing how many people that I unconsciously excluded who could have brought diverse viewpoints and experiences to our team, making us even better. This tendency is why women and people of color are often over mentored and under sponsored. In order to make real sustainable progress, we must actively override our primitive brain, and we got to train ourselves to behave differently until it becomes a habit. I truly believe that sponsorship is the answer, and have been thinking about whether we can do that in smaller, more manageable ways that are decentralized to create almost a groundswell of activity to drive this cultural shift in our organization. So outside of the formal programming, what can we all do and how can we all participate? So I've been thinking about this concept of micro sponsorship. I believe that if we create this culture of micro sponsorship, which just think about them as like small acts of support that we all can do, we can help combat workplace inequities. It's something that we can model for others in our organization because we as individuals can do it. It doesn't take a lot of work. As if you are an HR or a DEI professional, it can be incorporated into other learning programs. You can have influence over employee policies or talent review practices, but there's just not as much of a heavy lift as full-blown sponsorship. I'm going to come back to the risk in a little bit, but first I want to give you some examples to kind of tee up like what I'm thinking about, how I'm thinking about micro sponsorship. All right, so I'm going to go through some examples. The first is amplifying voices. So for example, if you're a manager, you can actively encourage and invite input from team members who might be often overlooked or whose perspectives might be typically marginalized. So you can actively create opportunities for these individuals to lead meetings or present ideas or maybe participate in decision-making discussions, ensuring that their voices are heard within the team. You can promote visibility. So let's say you're working on a team where underrepresented employees are rarely chosen to give the department update at a town hall meeting. When the next opportunity arises, nominate that employee to boost their visibility within the team and within the organization. Sorry, I think I forgot to move the slide here. All right. Provide mentorship. So we talked a little bit about mentorship already, but this is going beyond mentorship. And while we're here to talk about sponsorship today, mentoring relationships still create those critical relationships that help employees develop their skills. They help them navigate their careers, get exposure in the organization, overcome challenges. They also give employees enough time to develop that relationship that can create that path to more formal sponsorship. So if you aren't already, think about becoming a mentor. It's one of the most important things I think that you can do to lift people in your organization. The next thing is you can advocate for opportunities. Become a strategizer by intentionally communicating information about opportunities and by advocating, like recommending candidates for a new role or for like a stretch project that you have going on in your organization. If you have it in your influence, become an opportunity giver and provide some of those high visibility opportunities to some underrepresented employees. You can offer feedback to individuals. Offering feedback isn't always easy. I don't know if you can put in the chat whether you're a good feedback giver or whether it makes you nervous. I think it makes a lot of us nervous. It's not easy, but you could schedule one-on-one coaching sessions, or you could give both reinforcing and redirecting feedback to individuals. But when giving feedback, be careful. Ensure that you're giving feedback for the right reasons and that you understand how to prepare for or to give that effective feedback. Feedback is something I'm pretty passionate about as well. So if you do contact us after this webinar and want to chat about sponsorship, we can also dive into feedback. Okay, you can also share resources about training programs. Maybe there's educational materials, networking opportunities. This should be an easy one for us if you're an HR professional. You probably have all the ins on what's going on in your organization for development opportunities. Try to be intentional and personalized in your approach to sharing resources and invitations. Have one-on-one conversations with underrepresented individuals to help them develop the confidence to engage and provide them support along the way. You can also challenge biases. Challenging biases could be uncomfortable, and you might be afraid of saying the wrong thing or bringing repercussions onto yourself. I think that's what happens a lot of time where people don't want to speak up because they're afraid of what might happen. But when left unchecked, they can be detrimental to the career of individuals and for yourself. And honestly, it's bad for business. Studies show that bias in the workplace can limit the ability to attract and retain top talent. 31% of employees who perceive bias plan to leave their current employer within a year, and 80% of employees who perceive bias wouldn't recommend their employer to people in their networks. So it can be pretty powerful. Even if people aren't speaking up about things, their perceptions go a long way in how they feel about the organization and their belief that they can make a career at a certain company. All right, along with challenging bias is actively recognizing and addressing microaggressions. So as individuals, you can speak up, you can report. If you're an HR professional, you can provide training on how to identify and how to respond to microaggressions. You can establish clear protocols for reporting and addressing incidents in your organization. Really try to create that culture of respect and inclusion where all employees feel safe and they feel valued. You can also be a connector. So another act of micro-sponsorship is to help people develop relationships by opening your network, introducing them to people that they might not have the opportunity to meet. And you can talk them up with your peers. So this can help individuals get exposure to other areas of the business and build their overall business acumen. You can also create networking events or networking mentoring programs. You can establish ERGs or affinity groups if you don't already have them, or you can join an ERG as an ally to see how you can get more plugged in with different identity groups in your organization. If you're in a position to do so, you can support your ERG, you can be a leader, you can provide funding for events or activities from your department. You can provide access to leadership opportunities and institutional support for ERG initiatives and advocacy efforts. So if you're in a department, really promoting those ERGs within your group and supporting people's efforts and participation in the ERGs. You can also nominate underrepresented individuals for ERG leadership roles to help them develop their own leadership skills and to demonstrate their capabilities to the organization and get some more exposure within the organization and something that might not be their actual role. Another thing that you can do is you can help support work-life balance. I think a lot of people are calling this work-life integration now because understanding that it's all interconnected. But that balance can be difficult for people. I remember when I was working for an organization where I was one of 2 women in my department. So at the time I was a single mother. Almost every day when I was walking out the door at 5 p.m. to go get my kids from daycare because they closed at 6, my boss, I had to walk past his desk to get to the door. He would look up from his desk and he would say, "Giving up on the business already?" As an employee who was really trying to do the right thing, but also balance my work life, like, it was horrible to hear that every day. No, I wasn't in a position to be able to work 50 or 60 hours, nor should I really have to. So think about this. As an HR professional, if you can implement policies, programs, practices that enable employees to effectively balance their professional responsibilities with their personal lives. This can include stuff like flexible work arrangements or family-friendly policies, wellness programs, initiatives, things that promote mental health or well-being, as well as training for leaders on how to avoid saying things like the things that were said to me. I've been working with organizations recently to evaluate whether travel for a mentoring program launch events is necessary, and can that create a hardship for individuals who are primary caretakers. And so just thinking through the things and the activities that you're doing within your organization to ensure that everyone can participate in some of those activities. You could also publicly recognize or reward achievements to reinforce positive behavior and contributions from individuals. I worked with a leader that at the beginning of each department meeting, he would give a shout out or let us give a shout out to other individuals. And I've started to do this with my team here at Chronus by saying, like, I'm a fan of. So basically you'd say, like, I'm a fan of Amanda because she did this. Doing this and being intentional about who you're giving shout outs to in those types of environment is a great way to recognize and elevate individuals for accomplishments in that group setting. Another act of micro-sponsorship would be to provide opportunities for employees to acquire new knowledge or competencies or skills that are relevant to their roles or their career aspirations. You might be thinking, like, that's my whole job. I'm in HR. That's what I do if you're in one of those functions. If it is, evaluate the way that individuals are invited or nominated. Look for opportunities to ensure that you're working to remove barriers and bias from identifying high potential employees and giving them opportunities to participate in development programs to further, further develop their own skills. You could also encourage speaking opportunities like public speaking engagements, conferences, panel discussions, webinars like this, other opportunities to help people be able to share their expertise, their insights, their perspectives with wider audiences. This can help employees build their personal brand, expand their networks, enhance their professional visibility and also their credibility. So if you have opportunities like that, be intentional about who you are nominating for those speaking opportunities as well. It can be a strong act of micro-sponsorship. You can advocate for policy change. So if you're an HR professional or you're in that position, you can play a key role in developing and implementing company-wide policies. They can be to celebrate diversity, equity, and inclusion, as well as policies for work-life balance, pay equity, addressing microaggressions, any of those things that you think that are happening in your organization that need to be addressed. And finally, you can think about advocating for pay equity. So as individuals, you can teach underrepresented employees how to advocate and negotiate compensation. A lot of times, women, especially Black women especially, are underpaid compared to their peers for the same roles. And some of it is teaching people how to advocate for themselves, how to negotiate in that space. Some HR professionals have an opportunity, if you're one of those folks, to analyze compensation data to identify and address pay disparities, ensuring that your pay practices are fair and transparent. So these acts of micro-sponsorship, I gave you a whole bunch of them, can help play a crucial role in creating a workplace where your employees feel safe, valued, supported, empowered to succeed. Each of us holds that power to make a difference, whether it's through these small intentional actions or whether you have influence over programming where you could take actions as part of larger initiatives. All right, it's not without risk. It can be risky for a person you are advocating for to be advocated for. So please, if you're going to do anything like advocating for someone for a new role per se, please ask them, talk to them about it, talk to them about the fact that you want to do that for them and make sure that that's something that they want at that time. It can also be risky for low status groups to advocate for each other. Former Secretary of State Madeleine Albright and author Gloria Steinem were both criticized for telling young women to vote for Hillary Clinton. Rosalind Brewer, former CEO of Sam's Club and Walgreens, was called racist when she tried to advocate for people like her in her organization. So it is not without risk, but I am definitely not saying not to do it. In fact, I think now more than ever, people do need to do it. We all need to do it. But I think that the right place, like finding where you have power and leverage in your organization first is going to be helpful. So everyone has some kind of power or influence in their organization. And I know that we're going to take a poll now. So think through your organization. How much influence or power do you believe that you hold in your organization? I think there's some answers up there. Nyla, do you want to put those up on the screen? There you go. Thank you. Do you guys want to take that poll?
Yes,
no influence.
Take a moment to take this poll. But I really want to touch on something you said, Jody. Just when you said it's not without risk. I will say that the reward is greater, but when people are feeling scared and they want to speak up about pay equity, or they want to talk about some of the things that you mentioned, how can they do that without the fear of backlash?
Yeah, it's interesting. And I don't think that, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the spaces where it might be easier for you to do that after this poll. But, I think some of it is, there's always going to be the fear of backlash. I think some of it is making sure that, it's important to do it anyway. And it's important to kind of help create that culture in your organization where people can feel comfortable advocating for others. That's why I'm thinking, hey, if we all start to do kind of these smaller acts of sponsorship, micro sponsorship, where it's not like a huge, big programmatic thing, or we're creating kind of this mentorship path to sponsorship type program, but it's something that we all can just start to do in these small pockets where the risk may be smaller or where you may have influence in your organization. That way we can kind of create this momentum around these acts of sponsorship.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And it's just the right thing to do. If you feel like it's on your heart to speak up about it, it's the right thing to do. So thank you for sharing that, Jody.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm looking at the results of the poll. No influence, minimal influence. Okay. All right. So all across the board. So let's talk about influence a little bit. Because I think that I've evolved into thinking about this a little bit differently. Nyla, are you able to get the slides back up on the screen? Thank you so much. Okay. So I used to be kind of the same way. Like, I don't have any influence. I don't understand how I can help. And that was limiting for me. So last year I was at a conference. I heard this woman, Kelly Charles Collins, speak. She's the author of a book called Combo Catalyst. She was speaking about the power structure in organizations. She said the reason that women of color, Black women in particular, are often on the lowest rung of the corporate ladder, if you will, is because they aren't connected to the power structure, which in the US is white males. We've talked about that. So she said, white men are connected because they're white. Men of color are connected because they're men, but Black women aren't connected at all. And this resonated with me. It was a way that I've really never looked at it before. So a few months after the conference, I was networking with a woman who is a Black woman, and I was sharing Kelly's thoughts with her because I wanted to get her perspective. And she did. She shared some thoughts with me, which I thought were really important. I want to talk about them now. She said that while she is a Black woman, yes, she might be on the lowest rung of the corporate ladder, but that doesn't mean that she's without power. She's an attorney. As an attorney, she talked about her power being in her knowledge and her expertise in the field of law. And in that space, she does hold power. So I got to thinking, what if we all find the spaces, whether they're small or large, where we hold power and influence within our organization and our lives outside of work for that matter, and we use that power to elevate underrepresented people? So it's not this big professional reputation on the line, sponsorship, formal thing, but we use our power and we use our influence to create that culture of lifting one another up. We identify, we utilize our areas of influence, and we create meaningful change and support one another effectively while mitigating those risks that are involved, because we're not doing it at some big grand level. So it's about that strategic advocacy, recognizing the strength that we hold individually, collectively, in groups to support and uplift those around us. So let's talk about where we can drive change by acts of micro-sponsorship in our talent programs. And I realize that you might not be able to implement all of these within your current area of influence, but I encourage you to work with your colleagues and leaders to drive change. So as I'm going through these, you might see one that you don't agree with, but that's sort of the beauty of idea exchange, hearing new perspectives. I'm open to hearing yours, obviously. So let's just kind of go through these. So micro sponsorship, again, starting small, impactful actions to support and advance someone's career. 10 acts of micro sponsorship that can make these significant differences. Again, we worked through these, but I wanted to kind of summarize them all on one slide so you guys could see them. Someone asked me earlier what if I had to prioritize any of these 10, how would I prioritize them? It was an interesting question. And I thought, I don't know that I would. I think these acts are things that we can inherently do in our day-to-day lives that can support or make a difference for individuals. And they come up in the natural progression of everyday interactions. We have different relationships with different people in our organizations and in our life where it may seem very natural for you to do some of these things for certain individuals. And so it's not like, how do I prioritize these and then get started? It's just like, get started. Look at the relationships that you have in your life and see where you hold position, power, and influence in certain spaces, and then go leverage those.
And Jody, before you move on, I just have a quick question. So how should you check in with a person that you want to advocate for before sponsoring them? What's the best way to go about that?
Yeah, I think just having a conversation with them. I mean, obviously these are individuals who you probably have existing relationships with. So depending on what your relationship is, just check in. Like, hey, I saw this role, over here in the accounting department, and I know that you were interested in learning more about that department. Is it okay if I make a connection for you? Or hey, it's really great that you're applying for this new role in talent management. I know some people over there. Would you like me to be a referral for you? So it's just those kind of things where I think in the past, we often leave it to people to come ask us those things. Like, could you open a door for me? Or could you be a reference or a referral for me? Or could you keep an eye out for opportunities for me because I'm in between jobs? But those are things that we hear from people in our lives on a pretty regular basis, I would say. So it's kind of flipping the script on that and just saying, like, what can I actively and proactively do to help you? I have an idea. I have influence or power in this space. Can I leverage that on your behalf? And see what their response is. Sometimes it's going to be, hey, that's not the right space for me. It's not the right time for me. But a lot of times it's going to be, yeah, that would be awesome. So it's just thinking through how can you kind of flip those things and proactively be looking for ways that you can advocate for individuals. Nyla, does that help?
That does. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right. So if you are a person in your organization that can influence through programming, either you're directly responsible for programs in your organization or you're on a team or have some influence in some way, here are some ways that you can influence through programming. So if you're in charge of leadership development, you can educate leaders on the concept and importance of micro-sponsorship. You can help them recognize their areas of personal influence, organizational influence, and help them create actionable plans for implementing acts of micro-sponsorship. And again, it's not taking someone under your wing and shepherding their whole career. It's really about just these small intentional acts. Another thing you could do is you could build micro sponsorship into your mentoring program. So when I'm building mentoring programs for organizations, I always set the expectation that around month 3 or 4, the mentors open their professional networks for their mentees, and they intentionally introduce them to people that can help them advance their careers. And it's not always something that's thought about in the realm of kind of the mentorship relationship, which is often just two people kind of facing each other and working together. But it's really getting to know that person and then seeing where you can open doors from them through your own networks. So you can do things like that with your mentorship programs. You can also embed micro sponsorship into any DEI trainings that you might have, so participants can understand how they can actively support and advocate for underrepresented colleagues in their everyday interactions. If you're thinking about conducting workshops on recognizing opportunities for micro sponsorship, you might do some role playing exercises that kind of model that behavior for people and help them become more natural conversationalists around acts of micro sponsorship. You could create some discussion groups to brainstorm some micro sponsorship actions and encourage everyone to go give it a try. If you have influence in the employee resource group space, you could leverage ERGs to promote micro sponsorship. ERG members feel empowered to support each other within those spaces and can advocate for broader inclusion within the organization. If you're onboarding new employees, or you're running teams, or you work kind of in that onboarding space, you can instill the value of micro sponsorship from the start with individuals. Connect them with a buddy in their new hire orientation sessions. You can emphasize the importance of micro sponsorship and advocacy for other people, provide them practical examples, and also share success stories that can help new employees understand and embrace the culture that you're trying to create in your organization. You could host lunch and learns or interactive sessions where employees can learn and practice specific microchip actions, such as giving public praise or skill sharing or network building. This will really help your employees, kind of give them a chance and opportunity to acquire skills to support their colleagues and to foster that supportive workplace environment. If you are in the area of your organization where you have influence over the performance management, you can integrate micro sponsorship into performance evaluations. Employees can be motivated to engage in micro sponsorship, knowing it can be recognized and valued in their performance assessments. So, set some opportunities, some goals for people to kind of create that culture of micro sponsorship. If you're involved in succession planning, either as a leader or as an HR professional, you can help identify high potential employees from underrepresented groups. Remember, I talked about that example of the company that I'm working with that had already kind of squeezed the majority of underrepresented talent out before they ever got the opportunity to be sponsored. So really be intentional about looking at your pipeline, your leadership pipeline, your succession planning, and how can you create a more diverse and inclusive leadership pipeline. And so support that through intentional micro sponsorship efforts. If you're in talent acquisition, you can integrate micro sponsorship into your recruiting strategies. You can train recruiters to provide personalized support, feedback, networking opportunities to diverse candidates throughout that hiring process, and even maybe creating some mentorship opportunities. So, for example, if you identify a person in your recruiting process that's a first-generation college graduate, you could provide them with a mentor who can give them that support, making that transition between college and the workplace that others would get from their families that this individual might not get. So there's a variety of different ways that you can do that in the talent acquisition space. And I think something that we can all do is reward and highlight acts of micro sponsorship. You can create awards, recognition categories specifically for micro sponsorship. You can call people out who regularly promote people or advocate for people within the organization. Feature stories of microsponsorship in company communications, recognize individuals, can really help kind of create that culture and keep that sort of groundswell of microsponsorship going, celebrating it, encouraging it, and leading to this increased morale, but also inclusivity. So I know we have a few minutes left. I want to give an opportunity to talk about, for people to ask any questions that you might have, and think about any comments that you might have about how you can incorporate microsponsorship into your talent or DEI programs, or how you think you can personally leverage microsponsorship to create more supportive, inclusive workplaces.
Jody, thank you so much for the insightful presentation. Again, if you guys have any questions, please just drop in the chat and we will be sure to answer it. But before we move on to our audience Q&A, we want to give you a little more information about who we are at Chronus and what our focus is. So at Chronus, our motto is that we believe organizations only reach their greatest potential when their people do. And we believe these three areas are key to that potential. And of course, it's connection, it's purpose, and it's development. So at Chronus, go to the next slide. Okay, at Chronus, we help companies create connected workplaces where their employees thrive through mentoring and ERG programs. Chronus provides a comprehensive solution to workplace disengagement with an employee-driven approach, connecting individuals for shared learning and growth through a platform that offers access to connections, skill development, inclusion, and advancement opportunities. So all the things that Jody mentioned earlier in her presentation. But if you'd like to learn more about what we're doing and how we can help organizations like yours, please click the Get Demo button in the right corner, and one of our team members will be happy to reach out to you. Or if you want to just go to the website, please go to chronus.com and browse around, and we'll be happy to talk to you from there as well. So let's move on to the Q&A. So we did get a couple of questions. And again, if you have any additional questions that you didn't ask early on, please drop it in the chat section. So one of our questions, let me pull it up on the screen, was by Ashley Randolph. Let me see if I can share it so everyone can see it. Well, I don't know if I can share it, but it says, okay.
Oh,
yeah. So she said, I love the idea of supporting self-advocacy, but what about educating those in leadership/HR to be aware of pay disparities, et cetera?
Yeah, I think that's it's a really great question, and I do think that if you are in the position or you have influence over leadership or HR, or you're involved in some of those conversations, I think it's really great to start educating people about being aware of pay discrepancies, of unequal representation in leadership, of biases, of any of the things that you're experiencing in your organization. And I think a lot of times it can be done in a way that's just asking questions, right? So it can be done in a non-confrontational way. You could say, hey, when we're thinking about who we're going to, bring into the organization, are they at a representative pay wage? Just ask the questions, because those kind of questions can start to spark those things in people's minds that, yeah, I need to pay attention to that, or it's not something that I ever thought about. A lot of times in my area of influence and mentoring, when I am helping organizations with their launch planning, a lot of times they'll say, oh, we're going to make everyone travel together. I think I might have mentioned this earlier. We're going to make everyone travel to this one location. We're going to have a big kickoff celebration. Okay, we want to do that. Let's talk about the people you have in your program to make sure that you're not creating inequity or in having everyone come to travel, because travel can be hard for single parents, can be hard for people who may not have some of the financial stability. And so you want to make sure that you're recognizing and making the best possible equitable environment for everyone. And a lot of times just asking those questions in such a way will prompt people to be like, oh, I never thought about it that way. Right. So I'm not when I'm working with individual clients in that situation, I'm not telling them like, hey, you shouldn't do that because XYZ. I'm simply asking the question, hey, is this going to create any hardship for asking people to travel for XYZ reasons? And then it gets them thinking in a different way. So I think that I think we should do it. And I think we should use the spaces where we do have that influence, and get people, ask thought-provoking questions to get people to kind of come to their own conclusions.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Jody. So I think we have time for one more question. And a question in the chat was, how do you overcome resistance to DEI or DEI reduction these days in your organization?
Yeah, I think this is an interesting one. We've been talking about this one a lot here at Cronus, because obviously we work in this mentoring space. We have an ERG product that is primarily procured by DEI departments. And so when we're thinking about the changes to the industry, I think one of the ways to overcome that resistance is just to typically what you'll see with DEI departments is that they're not, even if the departments are sort of going away or the budget is going away, it's typically being left up to the business areas. And I think one of the ways that, so it's not like going away, it's just being decentralized and kind of like this should be part of our normal culture. So we're going to decentralize this. One of the best pieces of advice I can give to people, and if you're one of these people, you might not think so, but I think it's really great to make relationships with HR business partners, because those are the people who are in those organizations. They have a strong influence over HR policy and procedure within those groups, but they also usually have the ear of the senior leaders. And so I think it's really great to kind of be thinking about, how do you, if you are trying to drive change in your organization, how can you tap into people who do have influence in a different way and kind of get them as allies and advocates on your side?
Thank you for sharing that. So I believe we have one more question that came through, and we can squeeze it in these last 3 minutes. But the question is, how do you handle employers who discredit employee on the grounds that they resigned, especially those who give at least 30 days notice to last day of work?
Okay, I'm trying to understand the question. So you're talking about if someone resigns from the organization, they gave sufficient notice, and then during that notice period, they're being discredited.
That's what it seems. That's what it seems like. Let me know in the chat if we're getting it right.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's difficult, and I think a lot of times leaders can take things personally when someone decides to leave the organization for whatever reason. And I don't think that leaders should discredit people who choose to leave the organization. One, it might not really have, it might be due to some circumstances beyond the organization's control, right? It could be a family matter. It could be something personal to them. They could hope to come back one day. And I know that because I left an organization and then about 3 years later, I came back. And so, just trying to maintain that level of professionalism. And I think it can instill fear if you as a manager start to badmouth someone who's going to be leaving the organization, or even who has left the organization for whatever reason. That can instill some fear, like, ooh, would that happen to me if I chose to leave, or if I wanted to, sometimes people leave for opportunity as well. And I always say, like, I've worked under leaders who have, I think, felt threatened by me wanting to develop my own career, almost like, if I have a career development conversation with my leader, they think I'm coming for their job, or, something like that. So they kind of push back on that a little bit. And I think that we can all, if we actively try to develop someone as a leader, I think that helps the whole organization do better. I heard someone say it to me. I'm going to leave you guys on this note because I know we're almost at time. Someone said to me once, and it's an example I always use. They said, equity and inclusion isn't about giving someone else a piece of your pie. It's about making more pies. So you don't have to give up something for someone else to have something. We're going to work together to make more so that everyone has the same amount. And that really stuck with me as just kind of a really relevant example of, is I think kind of alluding to what you're talking to, about if you actively help develop people as managers, and not badmouth people, I think you're just doing the company, you're just making the company better. You're making everyone better. And then the organization does better. You have more pies. You have more pies.
Thank you so much, Jody. Thank you everyone for joining us today. We hope you guys have a wonderful day. Again, click the Get Demo button in the right corner if you have any more questions. Thank you. See you
Thanks,
guys.
everyone. Bye.